Welcome to a brand new episode about chatting about our mental health. So, we're framing a brand new discussion about writing and mental health and the process. And what are some of the challenges and obstacles that we deal with when dealing with mental health as a writer, whether that's writer's block, whether that's fear of failure, rejection, insecurity, or any number of things that prevent us from actually sitting down, writing, and getting our stuff out there. So, we're doing this live discussion today. Feel free to come join us. Feel free to come be involved in the conversation, drop a comment, and definitely come join the fun. What I've done, I've invited some other authors, some other writers from the community to come join me so we can have a dynamic discussion about mental health. For those of you who don't know, I'm Kauffman. This is part of my daily writing live stream series where I am on a mission to help writers make the process easy and fun with the right framework. So I'm going to bring up some of my friends here and welcome some of our writers to the stage. Welcome, welcome. So for those of you who don't know or who are just joining us, why don't you guys give them just a little bit of an introduction about who you are? I'll start from the top to the bottom. I'll go with Dana first. Just a little brief intro, who you are and what type of writing you do.
Yeah, I'm going to correct you. It's Dana. I'm Dana Bell. I am very versatile. I'm science fiction, fantasy, horror, paranormal romance, and I'm working on breaking into the middle grades, which I'm very, very excited about. I do have one middle grade story, and it's going to be part of the new book that I'm working on. That's pretty much what my genres are. Mm-hmm. And I have been through anything and everything you can possibly think of that shows up when you're trying to write. Writer's block, definitely get that. Been through divorce, been through deaths in the family. All of that affects your emotions and your mental health.
So it sounds like you've definitely been through your share of personal struggle. And I know for a lot of writers out there that they end up writing as a result of their experience and kind of treating it like therapy. So thank you, Dana, for sharing that. Dana, I was like, Dana, I always get it wrong. I was like, Dana, I'll get it in like 10 years. Okay. And I'll throw it back down to one of you guys. Amy, I'll throw it over to you if you want to introduce yourself.
Okay, awesome. So I'm Amy Bell. I am the co-host of How to Survive Until You're Published, the podcast. So I write young adult fantasy, romance, and I am still working on my debut novel. I've pitched it to a few publishers and they want to take a look at it, but I got to finish it first. So I'm in the middle of that. And then my co-host who isn't here, Megan Irene, she writes young adult horror and some sci-fi fantasy as well. And yeah, she's awesome. She's my best friend, so she's pretty nice. But yeah, we're super excited to talk about mental health today. I feel like it's a huge topic. It's very important.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Amy. It sounds like you'll be representing the two of you guys with twice the mental health discussion topics. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. John, I'll pass it off to you.
My name is John Allen Turner, and I am a speaker, author, coach, and mentor. I specialize in nonfiction, although I have worked on a couple of novels as well and some memoirs. I've written a dozen books of my own that have been published through major publishing companies. I've also ghostwritten about 55 other books, including 7 New York Times bestsellers. I spend a lot of time wrestling with the same fears and doubts and anxieties that most other writers and creatives face. And the truth is, the writing process isn't just about putting words on a page. It's about navigating the emotional roller coaster that comes with it, and the vulnerability of sharing your work with others, and the sting of rejection from publishers who don't want to publish your book, and the constant battle against the fear of failure. And if there's one thing I've learned, it is that mental health is just as important as the craft itself. So in my coaching work, now I coach authors through the writing process. I help writers and leaders confront those challenges head on, and we work to turn that fear into fuel and show them that vulnerability is strength, like Brene Brown talks about. So I'm just here to share my journey and whatever lessons I've learned and how I've come to embrace the messy, beautiful process of writing and living with intention.
Absolutely love it. John, thank you so much for sharing. I'm so glad to have all of you here with me. And I just want to welcome into the stream. John, thank you for joining us. Good evening. Good evening. I know, trying to get onto the stream. John, you're sharing about I fix my mental health problems. I don't think I could write as good as I do. Plus the fun thing, right? And also, ML, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you here. It's always so good. I think talking about mental health is so important, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to frame this first conversation around mental health. Because if we're not coming from a place of awareness into our own right, we're not going to be able to stay consistent. We're not going to be able to reach our goals and attain success. And I think we all have different experiences and backgrounds. So if you're dealing with different parts of your mental health that you've been struggling with lately, I would love to hear from you. Definitely feel free to drop a comment, and I would love to include you in the conversation. So for the three of you guys here with me, the first question that I always want to pose, and I'm always curious because I've been watching a couple of different like influencers, writers, content creators over the past couple of days about like mental health and how they deal with it. What do you guys think is the biggest obstacle that writers face when it comes to writing and in regards to their mental health? Because a lot of times I think it is mental health related, but assuming that it's not like some life circumstance, what do you guys think is the biggest obstacle that writers face?
The one I'm hearing a lot, particularly from beginning writers, is they're just starting to write their book and they're suddenly worried about where they're going to publish. And I'm sitting there going, well, you're putting the cart before the horse. And then the fear of rejection and the fear of this and fear of that. And so it's like, guys, welcome to writing. You're going to get rejected. You're going to get bad reviews. You're going to get all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you have to develop that thick skin, because if you don't get the thick skin, you're not going to survive in this business, and it's a business.
That's very true.
That is the truth. You know what's interesting? When I was kind of curious what the AI and Google search said was the top biggest fears of writers who are trying to write. The top 5 biggest reasons it listed was fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, fear of criticism, fear of failure, and fear of vulnerability.
All of which I think, if you've ever read any of Stephen Pressfield's work, if you haven't read Pressfield, I cannot recommend his stuff enough. The War of Art, Turning Pro. Kauffman, I don't know if we can swear on here or not.
Yeah, but, swearing's fine. I have no advertisers yet.
So he has a couple of other books. Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be, and nobody wants to read your shit. I've
heard of the War of Art. I've heard great things about the War of Art.
All of them. Anything he writes about the craft of writing is worth going immediately and purchasing and devouring. Wear some steel-toed shoes, because he will step all over your toes.
But for our audience, what would be the number 1 book you'd recommend of his that they like read first?
Do the Work.
Okay, cool. I'm going to drop that in the comments.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Do the work. But one of the things he talks about is this concept of resistance. And he says, you just know that the day you have circled on the calendar, you're going to sit down and start writing the great American novel. Your dishwasher is going to leak, and your water heater is going to explode, and your dog is going to bite the mailman, and your kids are going to get pink eye, and your significant other is going to say, we need to talk. And all of that is the universe's way of saying, how badly do you really want to write this? And I think self-doubt, self-criticism, fear of rejection, all of that is part of resistance. And so rather than John Acuff is a friend of mine, but I take issue with him saying punch fear in the face. I would say make friends with that. Recognize, oh, resistance, you're here. I was wondering when you would show up, and allow it to sit in the passenger seat of the car. You don't get to fiddle with the radio or with the thermostat, but you're welcome here. And that fear becomes fuel for you.
That's interesting.
And you just have to recognize it as such.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of had experience with that, like today, because I have a son, and I work full time, and I'm running a podcast, and so it's just hard to navigate time. And so I had a conversation with my husband today. He's like, you just have to make it a higher priority, and you have to move things around, and don't be afraid to adjust things to make it work. And yeah, it's taking it by the horns, seeing that there will be resistance. You just have to recognize that it is there, and just say, okay, you're not going to win today. So that's just how it works. So
I absolutely love that. For me, I think it comes down to having clear expectations for yourself. There's been times in my life where I've been working 68-hour work weeks, and I've been able to get some type of writing done, at least on a weekly consistency. There's been times where I've had 20, 30-hour work weeks, and I was never able to write because I was either busy, struggling with things, or making excuses. I know for the majority of this, of the writers in this community, we have a lot of beginning and intermediate writers who are still working towards publishing either their first or some of their early books. I think the biggest thing that I see and that I hear about is trying to find that balance of how do I write consistently to be able to write something that I love, but it also takes time, and how do I balance that with, all right, well, I have a job. I have a family. We're seeing in the chat, you're like, your husband, Corey, like your husband needs you to drive him everywhere, right? It's like, Calvin, your wife needs your utmost attention. 100% agree, right? You want to make sure that you're giving those commitments in your life the attention that they deserve, at the same time while being clear to whatever your own goals or your consistency is, right? If you're not writing for months on end, you're never going to publish that book. But you can't ignore your responsibilities if you have a family or you're a student or you have a job. So I think it's just trying to find balance, right? And I think when you're not doing it consistently, are you being straightforward and honest with yourself? Like, if you're busy, you're busy. Like, it's all good. But if you don't write for 3 or 4 months and you spend that free time watching television or social media, and then making excuse about how maybe you're like learning but not actually writing, you're never going to be able to publish that book.
Kauffman, if I could just push back a little bit on one thing.
Give it to me. I love it. All right.
I think balance is overrated.
Okay. Why is that?
I don't think your spouse wants to be loved in a balanced way. And so I would say, rather than trying to seek balance, I would find rhythm. Rhythm is less concerned with, oh, I did 4 hours over here, now I have to do 4 hours over there. Rhythm is just, which foot do I put my weight on right now? And understanding that there's a rhythm of life. Even sometimes when life is unbalanced, there can still be rhythm to it. And so if writing just becomes part of your daily rhythm, and you don't have to immerse yourself in writing 6 hours at a time. Jerry Jenkins likes to say, if you just put 6 to 8 hours a week into writing, and you can do that however you want, 1 hour a day, you can do that 6 hours one Saturday, however you choose to break that up. 6 hours a week, 6 to 8 hours a week should give you a pretty decent first draft in 90 to 120 days. You'll be surprised at how quickly the word count adds up if you just build it into the rhythm of your life, rather than trying to say, oh, I took this much time to do that, now I have to take that much time to do this other thing. That I would say balance is science, math. Rhythm is art.
Yeah, I just have a quick comment on that. That's kind of what I was going to say. I'm the type of person that in order to really get something out of it, I need like a consistent amount of time blocked away. And I'm kind of a part of trying to understand how to reorganize things is I got to just be okay with 15 minutes and like make the most of it and do the best I can, and then try the next day for another 15 minutes and be okay with that process as long as it's consistent. And yeah, John, I love what you said about rhythm. I feel like it really is just kind of putting it in a spot and just kind of getting into the rhythm, getting into the process of and keeping it there.
And
That
kind
makes
of
sense.
along the same lines, when I talk to a lot of beginning writers, and they say, I don't have time to write. You got 15 minutes a day? And they're like, what? And then, because I know of one pro author who wrote on his lunch break every single day. It took him a year to write a book. There's another story that I heard of. There's a lady who locks herself in her bathroom for a couple of hours on Saturday. That's when she writes. So it's like, find that space of time. I'm kind of having to rework that in my own life due to constant stuff that's going on. Going back to 40 hours a week was not a good idea. But that wasn't my decision. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm kind of learning to rebalance that whole thing. It's like, particularly like I'm saying, going, you've got 3 books to, you know.
I love this conversation on rhythm, because to me that means building a sustainable habit at the end of the day. And I try to put myself in the place of where I used to be when I was having all these competing priorities, and also with building a sustainable habit. I would completely agree with the rhythm aspect of that, John, because I've now had 220 consecutive writing live streams this year. And as a result of streaming for every day, because my goal for this year was to write every day for a year, stream the process to hold myself accountable and see if it was possible. I wrote a full draft of my fantasy book. Well, I've been writing my entire life. This is the first one I'm planning on publishing. And I can speak to just the consistency of making it a habit, making it part of my mindset has been successful. I also try to put myself into the mindset of, okay, so let's say somebody is dealing with the rhythm of life, right? If they've established successful, consistent habits, then when life hits them and maybe they deal with some type of medical disease, or maybe they're dealing with something extreme at work, they can be all right with taking a break. I'm always like, if you take a break, be intentional with your break, but then come back to it. And if you've developed that rhythm, that consistency, you'll flow back into, as you said, the rhythm. I think the rhythm's one of the best phrasings of consistency that I've heard before, John. I love that.
Thank you. I think that, again, to go back to one of the things that Pressfield talks about is oftentimes beginning writers feel like they need to wait for the muse to strike. And what Pressfield says is the muse is flying around looking for someone who has their laptop open. And so if you can just find that consistent rhythm, like I spend, whether it's 15 minutes, if that's all you've got, or 45 minutes or an hour, or I blocked off 2 hours today, that's what the muse is looking for. And you're far more likely to intersect with one another if you're actually seated and writing during that process.
Yeah. I've got it down where I can just sit down and say, okay, you're going to write. And I will sit there and I will write for an hour. So it's anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 words. So I'm also a little bit farther in my writing career than most. So
yeah, I got to say something about breaks just really quick. So last year I pushed myself really, really, really hard, and I pumped out a draft, a whole 75,000 words. Right? Yeah, 70 in like a month, like 2 months, and it was a lot of writing, a lot of words, and it was really stressful. But I didn't really realize how stressed I was because I had my body had attuned to that level of insanity. So it took it took a good friend of mine to say, okay, people say after you finish a first draft, take at least 3 months of a break. And I was like, 3 months? What? like, what am I gonna do? And so but I did. I just stopped, and it was the best thing I have ever done for myself and my writing, because it took my brain completely out of my world and was able to um help myself figure out how to get back in. And like I was able to see things more clearly. So like if you're at that point where it's too much, it's good to take a step back and to cut yourself off for as long as you can. That's like really healthy. But one thing about the muse, how I got back into writing, was because ideas started to kind of comfortably come back into my mind naturally. I wasn't like, okay, let's sit down and make this happen. It was kind of more like, okay, that's a good idea. So I feel like that's a good indicator of,
Mhm.
okay, you're ready to go, but you have to put aside time. You can't just let that be your drive. That's not going to work. You've got to
Again,
like,
I think that back to the idea of a rhythm, just
Mhm.
like there is an inhale and an exhale. Writing is the exhale,
Mhm.
and when, especially when you're in a sprint to finish it,
Mhm.
well, when you get done, you collapse. I mean, I've been watching the Olympics, and so I see all these runners, collapsing as soon as they cross the finish line, because they've just
Mhm.
poured out everything. But now
Mhm.
they need a time to inhale. And I think it's a similar process when you're writing a book. When you complete that book, you need to take some time to inhale. You need some time to refill your bucket, time for you to read or watch a streaming show, a limited series, or go to the movies, or do whatever you need to do to
or play a
put
video game.
stuff,
That's what I did.
play video game. Yeah.
Mhm.
Just to put stuff back in your brain so that you can find that rhythm again.
Yeah.
I think if I'm taking the rhythm, if I take it a step deeper, right? So I'm like, what motivates the rhythm? And I think what I hear from all of you guys, right, is that we're able to maintain it, we're able to establish it because we're at points in our life where we have that inner drive.
Mhm.
I always like to say the love for the craft, the story development, or whatever part of the process. I think the motivation is the key determining factor. And it's like, it's true motivation. Like, do you actually love the writing process, or are you trying to reach a means to an end?
Or like
And I think
Dorothy
that's
Parker
important.
said, I hate writing. I love having written.
Sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah, I feel like passion about your project is huge. I've been reading John Truby's book, what is it? It's right here. The Anatomy of Story. Sorry.
Mhm.
And one of the big things he talks about in there is to write a story that will change your life. And for you, like something that you are going to love. And I feel like I've kind of made my story into that. For me, it's a reflection of a lot of things that I've learned in my life. And because of that, I feel excited to 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 work on it. And I think about it constantly. I think about things I can improve and how to build the story, and working on it isn't hard. It's not painful. It's well, sometimes it's painful, just a little, but
Depending
like
on where you're at in the process.
yeah, it depends. But like it's exciting, and I have a motivation to sit down every day and work on it. And that was something I think that I got out as a result of taking that break, was just that passion and drive. It's before it was like pulling teeth to sit down and get words on a page, but now it's like, okay, I'm excited. This is going to be great. So I feel like that's a huge, huge part.
Yeah, I'm
And
surprised. I've
writers
been writing
write
for. Oh no, go
writers
for it,
write
John.
because they need to write, because they have to write, because if you don't write, it feels like you're pent up,
Yeah.
and or like you've inhaled too much and you haven't exhaled. And I think there's a difference between someone who writes, is a one and done writer, someone who has a story to tell and they're going to
Mhm.
write their memoir, and that's all it's going to be. There's another thing about being a professional writer. When
Mhm.
you choose to turn pro, one of the things you're doing is you're acknowledging, like, this is part of my identity, and I don't
Mhm.
know how to live well when I'm not writing.
Agreed.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so sorry, going along with that, two of my big, I guess, people in my life that I look up to are Taylor Swift and Brandon Sanderson. And
We all know Sanderson.
yeah,
Love Sanderson stuff.
um, and I've realized there's one similarity between the two of them. You wouldn't think that, but both of
Interesting.
them,
Okay.
yeah. So both of them have to create to continue moving. Taylor Swift she writes so many songs, so much music that she has more than enough to push out because that is how she lives. That's how she expresses herself. And same with Brandon
It's that
Sanderson.
consistency.
Yeah. And during COVID, he wrote, what was it, 6 or 7 novels because that was just how he lived. And I feel like that's, John, you're right. Like for a creator, for a writer, it's part of breathing. And so you finding that passion and harnessing that and making that like a part of you and a part of your life and a part of your process, that's just, yeah, it's like breathing. It's just what you have to do.
I know I'm the when I think about what I love about writing, I have loved it my entire life, and I think for me, what's unique is that I enjoy every part of the process, from writing, editing, brainstorming. Most writers, at least most of the writers I've spoken to the past 7-8 months, probably a couple hundred or a couple, maybe 1,000 on social media. It seems that most unpublished writers are interested in the developmental portion of it, in the creation, the ideation, and the beginning of building a story. And I think the struggle that I see is that a lot of writers have fun in a portion of it, and then when it gets hard and they're trying to balance that with life's priorities, that's where the difficulty arises.
Jerry Jenkins calls that the marathon in the middle.
That's a really good term, the marathon in the middle. So for you guys, what would you guys' recommendations and suggestions be towards writers who might be maybe working towards trying to get their first book published, but they're struggling with trying to find success in having positive mental health, but also being able to keep going with what they're working on?
The one nice thing about writing is you can make your own definition of success. I have gotten to the point where it's like, I love to write, so I write books. I'm fortunate that I'm now at the point where I can start expanding to other publishers. But I'm not looking to be on the bestseller list. I am not looking to be on talk shows. I could do it, but I'm not looking to do that. So it's like, write your own level of success. Get on sites that have other really well-known writers, and you're going to learn a few things. I mean, I've got great examples here in the Denver metro area of highly successful writers, and I'm learning from them. And life is not all glamour, like, let's say, on the television show Castle. It's not all like that. Not at all.
Yeah, I feel like it's so unique to each person, especially at the beginning, because at the beginning, all you're thinking about is how everybody else is doing better than you and how you can't seem to figure it out for yourself. And but I think the hard truth of it is that you just have to press on and figure out what works for you and your own mind. I mean, at least that's how it's been in my experience. There hasn't been some magical formula, which, I mean, I have looked. Okay. I have tried.
Wait, there's no magical formula to just get the books written?
Yeah, I have. I'm that type of person.
Let me clarify,
I follow
with
instructions
AI,
well.
get the books written well and authentically.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think when you work through a traditional publishing model, one of the things that they require of you is a book proposal. Mm-hmm. And I think that even if you're not going through a traditional publishing route, doing a book proposal is a very, very helpful exercise at the beginning. And when I'm working with new authors or a new project, I always start with the same 3 questions. And these are the 3 questions that I always put into book proposals for my clients. Number 1, why should this book even exist? Don't we have enough books out there? Why do we need your book? Like, what is your book going to do? Number 2, who's actually going to buy and read this book? And I'm not talking about your mom, because your mom's going to buy 6 copies and give them to her friends for Christmas. But who out there are you writing to, so that you can think reader first? And then the third question is, why should it be you writing this book? Why should you get to be the one to put this idea down on paper and get it out into the world? And when you get stuck in that marathon in the middle, going back to those 3 questions and the answers that you came up with for those 3 questions can really keep you going, can keep you motivated, and can keep you moving towards your goal. I think also breaking it down into an achievement goal and a process goal, because I think what happens with a lot of first-time writers is they try to write the entire book today. Mm-hmm. And this is where your outline comes in so handy. And I know there are pantsers and theories, about that, and Stephen King and all that kind of stuff.
And plotters, yep.
But having a good detailed outline, so that I know I don't have to write A to Z today. I just need to write B to C. Tomorrow I'll write C to D. The day after that I'll write D to E. Just keeps me, and then I can take a step back at the end of the week, and I can see my word count has gone up. I can see I've gone from A to F this week. And so I don't have to tackle it all at once. I think that's what gets discouraging at times, is I don't feel like I'm making as much progress as I need to make. But if you just keep with that, 6 to 8 hours a week, just keep watching your word count go up, keep watching your outline get filled in, that can be very helpful when you hit that marathon in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing in John Truby's book, they talks about the very first step is to write out your premise and to attack it, which definitely should have been something I did at the beginning, because it is so much easier to rewrite a premise than to rewrite 75,000 words. That's just, premise is a sentence, that's just how it works. Because people get great ideas and it's awesome, and you want to sit down and just start going. But I don't know. I guess that's a reason why usually first time authors have 12 or 15 drafts on their first novel. I mean, not that, I'm on draft 7 so far. So, but I feel like it's, you got to kind of figure out where you're going first before you really jump in. So
I always try to recommend for a lot of unpublished and newer writers I see is trying to use a mix of both approaches, because pantsers, you just go in and you write what you feel. Plotters, you plan everything out beforehand. And I think a really good approach, right? You shouldn't deny the inner urge if you just feel like writing. Never deny that, because that's authentic to you.
Agreed.
But if you write a full novel and you don't plan out anything, you are adding extra work, like you guys said, in later drafts. So I think it's a matter of, you can write when you authentically feel it. You can also do a little bit of planning, hey, where do I want this character to go from A, B, C, D in literally 10 minutes. You can take 10, 15 minutes. There's a way, I think, to do both approaches, which is what I really try to encourage writers, so they don't waste time on second, third, fourth drafts, especially as most writers are probably trying to write their first books on a budget, right? So you're saving time, which you probably don't have much of, and you're saving money from that you would have to invest in the amount of time an editor spends on the book later on, just by trying to be more strategic.
Yeah, I think that hybrid approach is really helpful, especially because, there are some writers, and I've certainly been in this case, where I don't know exactly what I think until I write it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that happens a lot.
And when I'm writing dialogue, sometimes I don't know exactly what the character is going to say until I'm in there, and I kind of have a sense of this is the sentence that needs to come next in the dialogue. And it's more of a sense than a knowing in advance. And so I think it's important to let yourself be surprised in the writing process, so that you're not so micromanaging these characters or this premise that you've come up with. that you are just hyper controlling of the entire process. So let yourself be surprised, but you should at least know where the story's going. You should at least have a sense of the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so one of the things that I encourage people to do, and usually include this in the book proposal as well, is there's a 75-word synopsis, there's a 300-word synopsis, and there's a 1-page synopsis. So that at least I have a very big, broad brush approach to what the beginning, the middle, and the end of this book is. And even in fiction, because fiction is not just about fiction. Fiction is about something deeper. It's about exploring issues, and it's about being able to communicate ideas in a parable form that you can't communicate in a lecture or a sermon form. And so what is the idea that I'm really exploring here through these characters and through this action? And staying true to that central idea keeps me from chasing too many rabbits and getting too far off the path.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's knowing what I think that's doing some brainstorming, whether it's you're planning for it or you're just learning through the writing process of understanding what is the story that I want to tell, right? Who is this character's journey, and what is the theme that I want to get across? With a lot of my personal writing, I try a lot of my theory and ideology is that all stories are about a character. So if you're ever stuck at a part of your story, how is the plot, the dialogue serving or not serving your core protagonist's journey? And whether or not, I know everybody has their own approach, but that's just something that's always made sense to me. Resonating a little bit in the hero's journey, but I think that's just what always works. And I think finding that clarity for the story that you want to tell, and then also why you want to tell it, and also speaking to Dana, what you said, knowing what your core reasoning is for wanting to put your story out there is so important. And I think that helps you keep your mental health in check if you're clear on what your goals are.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like one of the things that me and Megan have talked about in our podcast before is choosing what tools work for you. I feel like at least for me, it's kind of gathering as many tools as you possibly can, and then figuring out which ones work at what time of your writing process and just in your writing journey. Because I've gone to conferences. Conferences are super important and super helpful. I use most of my conference notes as my references, craft books, talking to writers, things like this, listening to podcasts. It's just gathering those tools. And then when something clicks, you're like, okay, go for it. Because I was talking to a friend the other day, and she's been trying to plot her novel out for a really long time. And she's like, I just saw something on Facebook that just kind of broke it down, and it seemed to make sense in my mind. And so I just went with it. And I was like, you know what? That's how it should work. Google how to plot and look at 10 or 15 ideas and just pick which one seems to make sense, because not everybody's incredible craft book is going to work for you. You have to kind of figure out, where your brain fits,
And jumping off of that, I want to think about being on the other side of the book. Because as writers, we sometimes can get so concerned and precious with our works, and we're afraid that it won't resonate with everybody. Well, just like there's no book about the craft of writing that's going to resonate with everybody, and some people are going to gravitate more towards this person or that person. Your book isn't going to resonate with everybody, and you've got to just be okay with that.
It's actually a good thing that it doesn't resonate with everyone.
Right,
you don't want it to.
And I hesitate to bring this into the conversation, but I'll bring in a phrase that Amway used to use in their sales trainings. And their sales trainings used to say, some will, some won't, so what? And I think that's a really healthy way to hold our work. Some people will like this, and some people won't like this. So what? To some extent, I'm not writing for them. I'm writing because this is breathing for me. I'm writing because I have a story to tell, and I believe it's going to resonate with some people out there. Doesn't need to resonate with everybody. I think, like you just said, Kauffman, it's a good thing that it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the less I can take personally about that, the healthier I'm going to be, the healthier my writing process is going to be.
I think what gets to a lot of writers is the comparison game in that aspect. I think like I start from a great standpoint. I start from a great place, right? I write, I put it out there, but then I see other writers on social media. And let's remember, the algorithms are designed to connect you with your interests. So then I see other writers being successful. Oh, they're doing the same things. What am I doing wrong? Because I want that level of success. And then we view success through the lens of what other writers are doing instead of staying in our own lane.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't done what Dana suggested earlier, which is defining success for ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Part of my success is the fact that I have mentored a ton of writers. I'm still mentoring writers. Is something that I love doing because I have a love for writers and I love helping them along their journey. I've got, when I'm going to turn one of my babes, who is doing phenomenally well at self-publishing. I am so proud of him. And I got to see one of his first stories, and I had to go through as an editor and say, one of my pet peeve words is that, just so you guys know. And I went through, this is before we also had, we could send stuff to each other in email. And he gave me a copy, and I went through and read it. And then I went on one page, and I circled every single that he used. There were 22 on that page.
Interesting. Why is that such a pet peeve for you?
Because it's overused. It's great if you use it strategically. But when you use it to get point A and point B, if the work becomes passive, there's no action going on, and it just slows down the pace. So I had
that makes sense. I think my theory is just don't use the same word more than like X number of times in a given paragraph or a page. I try to make sure that I don't use the same word more than twice in a single paragraph unless I'm using it with intention. And I'm like, I never break a rule.
Let me for folks who may be struggling with. I know it's super popular right now to claim that you have ADHD, and a lot of people do, and I don't mean to denigrate them. But I also know a lot of writers who struggle with the opposite and may lean in a little bit in the OCD direction. And just because now, as you've said this, Kauffman, I know for me now, I'm starting to think, oh crap, how many times have I used this word in this conversation? And I'm trying to be careful not to use the word that in my conversation with Dana, because I'm like, that's just how my brain works. So let me just make this reminder to new authors as well, particularly those who lean OCD. You cannot create and edit simultaneously.
right.
So let yourself use those words as many times as you need to or feel like doing. You can always fix it in the editing process. If you start to edit yourself while you're still in the creative process, that's when your brain is really going to get into a fight with itself and you'll shut down. So designate time for creating and for writing, and then designate time for editing and fixing your grammar and making sure that you don't use words redundantly.
What I tell most of the new authors is stop worrying that it's not perfect. Stop worrying what you're writing. Get that first draft out. The real writing is in your rewrite.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the real writing is. Get the story out first.
Right. Writing is rewriting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do
We get paralyzed and shut down when we're trying to make the first draft perfect, and so then we just go away from it. That's so I refer to that as procrastination.
I like that word.
Yeah.
Procrastination. I am saving that word. That's great.
Yeah, I have the advantage of working with a lot of new authors, and I don't know how many careers I've launched. I'm working with a lot of beginning writers on Facebook. Somebody asks the questions like, oh, I know the answer to that. So I answer their questions. And they pretty much are asking the same questions over and over and over. So, and it's amazing how many of them have not done any work on the actual, how do I get this published? Where do I find all of that? Da, 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 da.
Yeah, my favorite phrase is the first draft is you're writing the story to yourself. Like that's just how it is. That's just kind of a statement of fact. It's not going that first draft isn't going to be published. It's just not. And that's okay. Like that's totally the way it should be because you have to understand, you have to discover your story. I've learned that I feel like writing is not writing, it's kind of more like discovering because characters are so authentic, so human that and humans are so unpredictable that you have to like discover how they operate instead of I don't know, instead of like tell people how they operate. But I will say this about first drafts though. I feel like they are they're very pure. Um I know when I hit a really hard spot in my writing and I couldn't figure out where to move forward, I went back to my first draft. And there were pieces in there that hit the core of what I wanted that story to tell, like what I wanted in that story so bad. And it helped me to be like, okay, like am I still doing that? How can I pull that forward more? And so yeah, they're super important to just power through and to just get done for yourself. But they can also be a helpful tool later as you keep rewriting.
And Elizabeth Gilbert has talked about, how done is better than perfect, and don't be afraid of a shitty first draft. That's become, in the vernacular. I think Jordan Peele also is the screenwriter, talks about how his first draft, he knows he's just dumping sand into the sandbox that he can use to create a castle later. He just needs to get the words and he needs to have something. I kind of sometimes liken it to Michelangelo sculpting, the angel out of marble. You need the marble so that then you can chip away everything that's not the angel. All of those are just good, I think, helpful illustrations of what your first draft is. And if you get too precious with it and cling to it and it's not perfect yet and you're never going to make the progress you need. And then you're going to get frustrated. And then you're going to start with the self-doubt and the questioning and all of that kind of stuff. And you won't make the progress that you need to make. So I think in terms of your own mental health, because I want to make sure that I'm staying on track here with what we're supposed to be talking about. In terms of your own just good mental health, hold this loosely. Hold your drafts loosely. Hold your ideas and your values and the story you're trying to tell, hold that very, very closely and guard that. The words themselves, hold them as loosely as you can. And then I think it makes the process a lot more fluid.
And jumping off of that, every author goes through this process of it has to be perfect, it has to be this, it has to be that. And eventually you're going to get to a point where you realize that just tell the story, and then fix it later. But it takes a while to get there. So this is going to be a prolonged journey. It's going to take a lot of practice for you as the authors to become very good. And if you get that into your mind, that is going to help you get through all the different steps that you're going to have to get through to get to where you want to be. And I'm talking about, I started writing in 3rd grade. But I didn't start publishing until 2011. And I'm a lot older than I look, so I'm not going to tell you how old I am. But, that's just kind of the way it works. And I had to learn all of this through my whole entire life.
And this is why hiring a coach can be so helpful. Because a good writing coach has been through all of this stuff, knows where the pitfalls are, can help you. What it took me decades to learn, I can download to you in months. And so I think we have a romanticized idea of what the writing process needs to look like, that we're all going to wear tweed jackets with elbow patches and it's going to be fall in New England year round. And being a professional writer it's a grind, and it is there are ups and downs, and your emotional well-being is going to take a beating. And having someone who is who's been there and done that, I like to tell people that I'm just coaching. I'm trying to be the coach that I wish I had had 20 years ago. And I think that's why hiring a coach can be invaluable.
Yeah, I think with that too, like just other writing friends and going to conferences and just participating in the writing community is huge. Like today I was working through John Truby's book, and there's like just this super awesome concept that just like blew my mind. And so I just pulled out my phone and I took a video of myself talking about it. I sent it to my friend. I'm like, you have to hear this. And it's just it's a cool outlet to just be able to be like, look what I discovered. And or to be like, I am so frustrated right now, I don't know what to do. It's good to have people there that are struggling with you, and then also coaches that can like help you make sense of what you're feeling and what you're struggling with. Those are incredible tools, and it's important to just know you're not alone in all of those feelings, because we've all been there.
And I think that's finding a writing community is so important, right? Finding the right resources. And I think find all the free resources you can. Find the writing community. There's a million things out there on Google and YouTube. So many authors who are speaking their truth. And I think find the free stuff. Yeah. Take that, do what you can with it. And then when you need that help, understand what is the problem that you're dealing with. Is it like a skill-based problem? Like, I suck at writing dialogue, so I feel like my stories suck. Well, skill-based problem, that's an easy one. You can learn more. If it's a mental health-based or like a motivational problem, then John, like you were saying, like a coach absolutely can help with that. A community can as well, but I think it's trying to find balance and getting yourself to that understanding within of what is the specific help that I need to achieve the end result that I want.
And I think a good coaching program involves tools and resources and information, but also has a sense of community. Either that coach has other clients that they could, connect you with, or certainly that coach themselves should be offering accountability, yes, but also a sense of belonging and care of what you're going through in this process of writing. I think it was Hemingway who said, or it may have been Henry Miller, that said, writing is easy. You just sit down in front of a typewriter and bleed. And it can feel that way because you're exposing yourself, and it can be very raw at times. And having a sensitive person who knows what that feels like. I've just written the most vulnerable thing I've ever written, and I'm terrified that people are going to read this and think that I'm a freak. It's important to have someone who says, you're going to be okay. And I'm going to walk through this with you, no matter what people say about your writing. I'm here, and I'm not going to let you go through this alone.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that, because in my paranormal romance, I have a woman recovering from being abused by her husband. Now, I was abused by my husband. And my publisher and I had to have a lot of talks. She's also a friend. A lot of talks back and forth, because she was trying to measure how much of what you're telling is true, how much it came from crime dramas. Because she's just kind of, and I understand because there's some legalistic stuff involved too. But it really helped because she had already understood what I had gone through, and it was important for me to include that aspect in this book. And as she put it, this is the best book you've ever written. And no, it's not under my real name, it's under a pen name. But I'm kind of, I was scared to death to put it out there, but I'm like, well, you know what? It is the way it is.
And I feel like that's part of writing too, is that there's people out there that have experiences like that, and they need your story. Like, nobody else can write it the way you can. And people need to hear that. That's kind of how I've taken on like my own personal role, mostly just to like get out of the whole like I got to be better than everybody else concept. Is just like I'm doing it for the one person that's going to read my book. Oops, sorry. I'm doing it for just the one person.
Mhm.
And like it's kind of a beautiful thing to just think that it will help somebody, what you went
C.S.
through
Lewis
helps.
said that the two most powerful words in the English language are "me too," because we all carry things where we think, am I the only one who's ever experienced this? Am I the only one who's ever felt
Mhm.
this? Am I the only one who's ever thought this? And if I could pick up a book somewhere out there and read something and think, oh my gosh, it's not just me. This author feels the same way or thinks the same way or it went through the exact same thing. That is one of the most empowering feelings a human being can experience. And so as authors, that's part of our job, is to put these things out there as a way of saying, you're not alone. Me too. I feel that way too. I think that way too. I went through that too.
I also have I have a very unusual upbringing, and I've lived in a lot of different places. I've visited a lot of places. So I have this advantage of being able to create places that are actually real. And people think they're fiction, and I'm sitting there going, no, that's actually a waterfront park in Boston, my favorite place that I love to go. And it's actually in House Sitter, if you ever see that movie. Um, but it was my favorite place, and I have a gorgeous scene between my couple placed in that park. And that was a lot of fun because I had it in 3 different cities. And again, this is my paranormal romance. It's under my pen name. But it's a lot of fun because I'm drawing on all this experience and all this background. And the book that's going to be coming out, I had to go back, and my father was a district conservationist. I grew up on ranches, farms, and I had relatives who did orchards. And I had to use all of that in that book.
And to be able to do that, you have to be in a place where you've made peace with all of those experiences,
Mm-hmm.
which is why um, uh, taking care of your mental health on the front end of writing can be so important,
Hmm.
because
Yeah,
your
for sure.
writing is so much better now that you've been able to use things that you know for sure, things that you experienced in your own life, but you won't be able to write them in a way that is compelling and helpful for others if you haven't made peace with that yet. So I saw that earlier in the comments, someone had left a comment about being afraid that if they fix their mental health issues, they won't be able to write quite as well. And
Mm-mm.
I think that's a bit of a myth. I think the more you're able to get a handle on your mental health issues, whatever they are, I think it's this myth that creativity thrives on chaos, and that the best art comes from suffering. And I think that intense emotions can fuel bursts of creativity, but it's also like a fire that can burn out of control.
Mhm.
And you might get some good work done, but what's the cost to you? And when you take care of your mental health, you're not snuffing out that fire. You're learning how to control it, how to harness it, how to keep it in a fireplace, or how to keep it in a stove. You're creating a sustainable way to tap into your creativity without getting burned up yourself. Healthy minds don't stifle creativity. They just learn how to channel it more effectively.
I can totally speak to that, John. I know there was a couple years in my life. This must have been about probably 8 to 10 years ago, where there was probably a solid like 2 years where I was at in my life. I was not in a very healthy state of mind, but there was a period, and it was definitely a couple years where I got some incredible, intense writing experiences when I was feeling at like the depths of like my core, my mental health. My mental health was not good, but there were moments, and usually it would last for a few hours, maybe a day, where I would write this really good stuff. But then what happened was I would end up doing this roller coaster where then when I wasn't at that struggle at the depths of what I'll call the struggle bus, I would I wouldn't be able to I didn't feel like I was able to write anything that felt consistently or quality. So then what happened was I trapped myself in this loop where I felt like, okay, for me to write well, I have to be at this core emotional struggle in my life. But I could only hit that point when I was at a bottom. So then when I was at the rest of the circle, I felt like, okay, well, I'm not a real writer because I'm not writing. Okay, well, I'll just wait till life sucks again. Okay, life sucks. Now I'm writing well, but now I can only write well when life sucks. And then I trapped myself in this cyclical process where I wasn't actually able to be sustainable or consistent. I was just writing when I was feeling an emotional rock bottom. And now, like, so coming so far and looking back on that it's crazy to see how much I grown from that experience, and also to see just how unsustainable that was in the long term. So that definitely really resonates with me.
Yeah, I have to agree. I suffer from SAD, which is seasonally affective depression. So usually from about the time Mile High Con is over through mid-January, I usually can't write anything. I got into a situation last year where I had deadlines in that time period. So I had to write. And I actually discovered it's like, oh, I can actually do this, even though I'm dealing with SAD, which sometimes last year was kind of not really great, but I still managed to do it. So I got it done. But and I'm excited because one of the products is already out and it was a lot of fun to do.
And I think that's a hallmark of a pro, right? A professional writer can write regardless of what's going on in their lives. And just like Calvin says here in the comments, I've written my worst stuff at my rock bottom. I totally get that. But you won't be at rock bottom for the rest of your life, and you still want to be able to write. And it's not like those experiences have gone away. You just have a little bit of distance from them. You can still tap into them, and you can still, if you experienced that emotion once, or if you were able to convey it out loud or on paper once, you can do it again. It's I think from writing from a healthy position enables you to tap back into those things without being just sucked into them. So you have access to it more readily than it has access to you.
Absolutely love that. I once again, I just want to say, like, thank you all. This is an absolutely phenomenal conversation. I want to take this moment and open it up to our audience here. So if you're here joining us in the live stream, first off, thank you for being involved in the conversation and dropping some incredible comments. Trust me, we are reading them all. I'm dropping all the comments that I'm seeing, and you are really helping to help contribute to the conversation. So if you have any questions, let me phrase like this. What questions do you have about writing and mental health? I have some amazing, incredible authors and writers here who have some great insight and expertise. Drop your questions. I would love to pose them to the group so we can help you out if there's any specific areas of writing and mental health that you struggle with. Beautiful. So with that being said, as we get into the next part of this writing conversation, what after a lifetime of writing, so it sounds like we're all here at different experiences, what would you guys say has been like your number one key learning about having a positive like mental health with your writing journey? What would you say has been your like one learning? Does that make sense?
Not quite, but sort of.
I guess what's been your one like key takeaway from your dealing with your struggles with your own personal mental health? Let me frame that better.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm trying to think. So during my 3-month break, my infamous break, I had a lot of mental struggles. I mean, just like my whole life is a mental struggle. So like, it was just a little higher than normal at that point. But because I wasn't writing, I just had some pretty incredible experiences that were also really difficult during that time. And I focused on those and focused on overcoming them and like understanding how to move forward in my life. And then because of that, it just enriched my writing because it made my own experiences more real. I guess like it made what I wanted to write more real and like and things like that. I guess if that makes sense. I don't know. I feel like I discovered the theme of my book during that time because of what I was going through. And so it I guess it's focus on you, make sure you're focusing on you, but also make like understand that it's a tool that can be used, you know, to help your writing improve because all experience, I mean, we're writing about humans, right? And all experience is experience and it's all going to help no matter what. So
Well, as I've been teaching a lot of people recently, it's like life is a roller coaster, up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. There can be good times, there can be bad times, there can be times when you're gonna like pull your hair out. But if you learn from it and you can learn how to incorporate it into your writing, like I have, um, you're actually going to be putting parts of yourself into your books. There's not any story or anything else that I write that doesn't have a part of my background in it. Even if I'm just writing about cats, it still has, because I have tons of cats in my life, it still reflects my love for the felines. And so it's just, there's going to be a part of you in everything. And in a way, if you have descendants or family, guess what they're going to do and what they're going to treasure.
Rick Warren uses that illustration of the roller coaster ups and downs, but he uses it a little bit differently. He says he used to think that the ups were the joys and the downs were the sorrows. But he says what he's experienced over a lifetime of joy and pain is that the joy and the suffering are the two tracks, that they're always running
Interesting.
simultaneously in your life, that there's always joy and there's always sorrow. You know, that's the Chinese theory of yin and yang, right? There is a good even in bad, and there is a bad even in good. And recognizing that, I think, can be super helpful, that there's always something you can find to be happy about, to be grateful for. And there's always something you can find that needs improvement or that you could be sad about. I think the recognition of that is paramount. That and some of the best advice I got from my therapist when I went through a divorce about 10 years ago, he said, you're allowed to have shitty hours, you're not allowed to have shitty days. So do something, at least one thing every day that makes you feel good, that makes you feel happy. Eat something delicious or drink something that's refreshing or get outside in nature. Do something that you enjoy and that feels good so that when you lay your head on the pillow at night, you can look back and say, well, the day wasn't a complete loss because there was at least this one bright spot in it. And I think as we approach our mental health and as writers, you're going to have days where you feel more up than down, but there's something you can look back on that was a bright spot in that day. And even on your best days where you are elated and you think life couldn't get any better than this, you could probably find something to complain about if you looked hard enough. So much of it comes down to what you're looking for. You're looking for something to complain about and be miserable about. There's plenty out there to find. But if you're looking for something to be happy about, something that lifts your mood and your spirits, that's also there as well. And so recognizing the rhythm of life and that there are ups and downs, but also that, you know, that you're never too far away from a bright spot.
I absolutely love that. Thank you all for sharing. I love each of your unique experiences. Definitely resonates with me in our journeys of writers of understanding ourselves. So that way we can tell the stories we want to tell. there's a couple comments and questions that had popped up that I wanted to pop up on screen. So one of the ones that Calvin brought up recently, Calvin said, "I've spent 3 years on and off writing my first book, and I'm still terrified it might not be good enough." How would you
For
guys
whom?
respond to that? Like, how do you respond to somebody who's like that fear of it might suck?
Good enough for whom?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question I'm going to start with. Is it like, and what is good enough? You know, good enough for you? Good enough for your ideal reader? Good enough? So there are too many things in that question itself that have to be defined. Good enough for anyone, Calvin now says. You won't know until you put it out in the market. And this is a hard part of the business of writing, is we are terrible. We are notoriously bad at gauging the merit and value of our own ideas and intellectual property. But the market won't lie. So you won't know until you put it out there, which is why I think investing 15 years of your life and doing 227 different drafts of a thing. Well, then by the time you put it out, if it doesn't work, you're screwed. Get it out there into the market sooner rather than later. And then you haven't invested too much of your life so that you're so invested in like the success or failure of this thing. Get it out there. See if it resonates. Float some early drafts. Have a reading group, you know, like we've been talking about, being part of a community that you can share some of these ideas with, so you can test the material before you polish it. You know, I try to tell my clients, get it out there with one bell and one whistle. You don't need all of the bells and all of the whistles. Just get it out there with a bell and a whistle, and then you can polish it after you've gotten some initial feedback.
Yeah, just make sure it's not a room full of English majors.
That
was my first experience in critique.
It's going to get torn to shreds regardless.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. After that experience, editors are a piece of cake. Because it was a great learning experience, and it took my writing from being here to being here. And that's what feedback does for your books, just so you guys know. And what you're asking, I see that asked every day in beginning writing groups. Well, what if it's not good enough? And it's like, you know what? No book is perfect. I have found errors in a lot of books. One was a bestseller, had movie spinoffs, had a huge error in it that the author missed and the editor missed. Threw me out of the book. And I'm like, oh, she just made this huge error. And it's a pivotal scene. Unfortunately, she goofed.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I felt sorry for her. But it was. And the only reason I knew is because my now ex-husband was in the same type of area that she had set the story in. And the same thing had just happened. And I'm like going, she didn't do her homework.
I also think it can be helpful to consider our work like our children. I don't know how many of you have raised kids, but I used to do parenting seminars, and people would ask, you know, when do I know it's time to get my kid a smartphone? When do I know it's okay to let them ride their bike out of the neighborhood or have a sleepover or whatever? And I used to tell them the same thing. Usually that's going to happen later than they think you should, and sooner than you think you should. So when it comes, like, when do I know the book is finished? When do I know the book is ready to show? It's probably going to happen sooner than you think it should. What's that?
Or later.
Or later than, but getting your ideas out there and getting that feedback is so helpful, and nothing will improve your writing more. It requires a thick skin, and it requires you not to take stuff personally, again, which comes back to your mental health. So this is why dealing with your mental health issues on the front end is so important, because you've got to get that out there, and you've got to let your book or your idea, your novel or whatever, fall down and skin its knee a few times. And you've got to be okay with that happening. It's going to fall off its bike. It's going to fall off the swing set and break its arm. It's going to get its heart broken. And you as the parent have to be okay with that happening. Otherwise, you're just going to, bubble wrap your life, and you'll never get your work out there. And your ideas then will never be able to change the world or change the world for a person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's the fear of a loss of time. I think at the heart of it, it's time is the one resource we don't get more of, or we don't get back. And it's that fear of, okay, I've spent 5 years of my life devoted to this project. I put it out there. People hate it. It now minimizes the time investment, where if I'm coming at it from a healthy perspective, I'm learning from the experience, regardless of how people perceive it. And it's feedback to help me improve as a writer and make the story better.
And I'm writing because I write. It's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Not writing because I want to make $1 million, or, I mean, don't get me wrong. Of course I want to make $1 million, but that's not why I got into writing. If you got into writing because you thought this was going to make you rich, I hate to be the one to break this to you, but that probably isn't going to happen. Maybe it will. I hope it does, but it probably isn't going to happen. And so you get into writing for some other reason than because this is lucrative.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I have another really great question here from Courtney, and Calvin, I hope we were able to answer that, kind of like that statement for you. And let's see, Courtney has a great question here. So how do you write mental health issues without opening those wounds? This is a good one, because a lot of writers go into a writing process from a point of maybe therapy, of like, okay, I'm writing things that happened to me for me to maybe work through them. And I know that a lot of writers do that.
So, I'll go first. I'm not entirely sure exactly what to say, but for fiction writers, because I write fiction, for me, it's always been about digging in deep with my characters and kind of separating you from your character, which is like hard sometimes, but kind of giving it a place, like putting it somewhere, can help kind of keep those wounds closed.
And so kind of like being able to experience it, being able to empathize with what happened without pulling yourself into the experience or the trauma.
Yeah. And I'm also like a very technical thinker. And so like, I'm obsessed with character development, because like it's such a moldable thing, but I want it to be very logical. It's just not, but like I want it to be so bad. So I study it like hardcore. But one of my favorite resources is The Emotional Wound Thesaurus. That is an incredible book, partially because it's a pair of writers. They go through a bunch of different wounds, or like hard experiences that can build your character in certain ways. And so it looks at it very logically, but it also gives you a lot of incredible tools at the beginning on how to do that. And so that can help, like, if you can focus on like how that thing will help them grow in a certain way, then it can, it just compartmentalizes it. At least that's how I think. I know that's not how everybody is, but.
Now, having already done that, you have to understand that I still am dealing with PTSD because of it. Not as bad as it was, thankfully. But I wrote it because I got to be a big fan of a certain TV show. I was going to write a piece of fan fiction, and I went, wait a minute, I like this too well. I'm going to turn it into an actual real book. And I made the conscious decision to have my heroine having gone through abuse with her husband. it was also very helpful for me to go through some of it and to suddenly realize it's like, you know what, this doesn't really bother me anymore. Besides which, I killed off the ex-husband toward the end. Oh, that's something else I'm now going to tell you is it's like, be careful because writers will include anything and everything from their life in the book. And
Oh, yeah.
you might end up horribly murdered. um, it happens. But it was a really fun book to write, both what was real and what wasn't. And it helped me heal, but I also had distanced myself enough from the experience that I was able to write it. So you have to kind of learn to divorce your emotions from it. Because quite frankly, I was that main character in that book. I'll be honest, I Mary Sued myself. But it was fun. I wrote that book in 2 months.
I think writing can be therapeutic, but it is a little bit like Aflac. Aflac is supplemental insurance. It is not primary insurance. And so if you're expecting your writing process to do all of the heavy lifting in your therapy, you will get yourself in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're doing the work on your own, whether through a coach or a therapist or a social worker, a mental health professional, a pastor, a trusted person in your life, then writing can work in tandem with that work to bolster your mental health. But if you're not doing the work, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. And then the writing becomes counterproductive to who you are and the kind of person you want to become. I also think, again, thinking of your work as a separate person almost, just like being in a healthy relationship can be therapeutic, as long as you don't expect your partner to be your therapist. It's expecting too much of your art. It's expecting too much of your craft. It's expecting your craft to do something it's not intended to do. It's not here to make you happy. It's not here to make you healthy. It's not here to make you wealthy. It's here as something that you do because it's kind of like breathing, as we've said before. If you're doing it from a healthy place, it makes you healthier. If you do it from an unhealthy place, it makes you unhealthier. But you cannot rely on your art or your craft to do something it's not intended to do.
Which is why therapy is so important.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing. Like, that's some incredible insight and expertise. I think we had some absolutely great questions here from our community. Thank you for asking some really great questions, really great jumping off points. So as we're hitting up this, we're nearing the 1.5 hour mark. I want to make sure to give each of you the space to be able to share a little bit about maybe like what you're working on with or what's coming up next for you, for your brand, if any of our writers or audience want to know more about you. And this time I'll throw it to you first, John, to kind of share like how can people find you and what is there something you're working on right now?
I've been since the pandemic. During the pandemic, I should say, I started writing a series of books called Welcome to Your Life. So the first one was Welcome to Your Life. Then there was Welcome to Your Thought Life, Welcome to Your Dream Life, Welcome to Your Wealthy Life. Right now I'm working on Welcome to Your Love Life. So that'll be the 5th and final installment in this whole series.
Probably
and it's
something
all
we all need.
It's all of the coaching experience that I have set down in books. And so I've been focused on that. I've also recently had my largest client roll off. And so I've been back into the coaching space myself. So coaching people either in their intellectual property in terms of business or helping people figure out what the next chapter of their life is, or helping people finally get that book written. So those are the three things that I tend to work on. And if you can spell my middle name, you can find me on all the socials, because it's just my name. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. You and I connected, Kauffman, through Threads.
Yep,
and
Threads, which that's
and
also
Threads,
really growing like writing community on there.
fantastic writing community. So, and if you just want to go to my website is myname.com. So
I just threw that down in the comments.
Oh, thank you so much for doing that. And so if anybody has questions about what the writing process looks like, and how to work with me on a one-on-one basis, they can go to my website. They can find a link to my calendar, and you can schedule a time to meet with me there.
Beautiful. And then I'll throw it over to you, Amy.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not published yet, but me and my friend have a podcast, How to Survive Until You're Published. So we are a writer's survival guide on Instagram. That's kind of like our primary right now. I'm still
Which we probably all need. I need as many survival guides for this experience.
Yeah, I'm still working on our YouTube page. That's on me, and I haven't gotten to it yet. And then we have a website too. It's a writersurvivalguide.com. But yeah, our best place is to go to Instagram, or just on our podcast on Spotify. So
beautiful. Thank you for that. And then Dana. Oh my goodness, I'm going to take forever with this.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. I never broke my college advisor calling me that. I gave up. Hey, sometimes it just pays. I do have a YouTube channel, which I just put in the chat.
Beautiful.
If you want to go in and hear readings, there's a demo that I put on there for Jordan Con one year, and something else, some other stuff on there. There's not a lot on there. I'm a little behind on doing readings right now. But I do have a new book coming out on the 20th of this month, which I am extremely excited about. I write for a variety of audiences. The name of the book is Home Flow Search, and it's the one that I got to use a lot of my own background on. And I'm going to give you a clue. This is my Bible.
I love that.
For the universe that I'm writing in, and this has been a several decades old project. I had the characters, I had the worlds, I didn't have story. And finally, I have that story, and I'm working on the second book. There will be a third book, and I'm also now working on the third book for the Winter trilogy. And Winter Emergence came out beginning of January, and the first book is still actually in prep. And all of those can be found at Singer Publications or Amazon.
Excellent, beautiful. And I also threw your YouTube link down in the description. When does your book come out again?
The 20th of this month.
Okay, perfect. And I always tell this to all writers: whenever your launch day is for your book, let me know. We'll shout it out on the live stream. Right? We want to put it out there as much as possible. Okay, awesome. So thank you all for joining me today. This has been such an invaluable conversation. And one of the reasons that I love doing these things is because I'm learning so much. It's kind of like I'm building the community, but I'm also being a little selfish because I also want to learn from other writers. Because I'm just a student of life over here. But the insight and experience from each of your writing backgrounds is phenomenal. I really just want to thank you for taking your time to come join me today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. This has been great.
Awesome. Beautiful. And now let me just wrap this up really quick. So thank you for joining us today. This has been such a dynamic discussion about mental health. And clearly we had some great conversations with our writers. Thank you all for being involved in the discussion, asking questions. If you enjoyed this, let me know. I will do more of these types of discussions in the future because I know mental health is so important as writers. Now, as we're looking towards tomorrow, I have a packed weekend this weekend. And if you enjoyed the stream, if you got value out of this, follow and subscribe. Smash that follow button. Like I said, I'm live streaming every day, 222 days of consecutive streams and counting. So whether you're looking for writing podcasts, discussions, writing sprints, inspiration, motivation, all the things, we got it right here on the Right Now channel and community. As for tomorrow, let's see, I was trying to pull up the picture. I created the thumbnail somewhere. So tomorrow we're actually doing a brand new thing. Usually on Saturdays is the story and critique show where we do critiques of stories. But due to popular requests by the writing community, we're doing the Blurb and Pitch Fest. I'm going to be doing a deep dive into what is a blurb for a book, what's a pitch for a script, and we're going to look at some best-selling novels. Why do they work as blurbs? And it's probably a huge factor for why people are spending money to buy the books. So definitely come join me tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let me throw it up here on the screen just so you can see. And perfect. So here's the thumbnail for it. This is the Blurb and Pitch Fest. Perfect. So this is what I have up here. Definitely going to be really, really cool. Come join us. It'll be at 1 p.m. Pacific, 1, 2, 3, 4 p.m. Eastern. So that'll be a lot of fun. And Sunday, we have our podcast about writing professionals, how to start a writing brand that makes money. So I'm going to be bringing on a dynamic writing duo over from Release Your Inner Dragon. It's going to be a great weekend. Same time, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. So we got a packed weekend. I'll be here right now. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers.